It's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is cite. Let's start by taking a look at some of the definitions for this verb. The first way you might hear the verb cite used is to mean to quote from a text as evidence for or justification of an argument or statement. This is a verb that you will either hear or see when you are doing academic writing. So this is a really common expectation. Not that you only share your personal thoughts, experiences, but you reference others' research, their writings as evidence to support your claim or your position, your opinion, whatever type of writing that you might be doing. A second way you might hear the verb cite used is to mention as an example. I feel like I see this usage frequently in newspaper articles, offering as an example something or providing a reason, that type of usage and meaning. A third way you might hear the verb cite used is to mean to praise someone for a courageous act in an official role. So this particular verb might describe, again, kind of official praise that someone who is in the military, in the police force, in firefighting or EMS type roles, they might be recognized for a courageous act during their service, in their line of work. You should know that cite is a regular verb. To make the progressive tense, I'm going to drop the E and then add ing to form citing. The past tense and participle forms of this verb are made by adding D, because this verb already ends with an E. The base verb cite ends with a T sound. So our past tense ending is going to make an id sound. Cited, cited. Now let's take a look at a phrasal verb. I just have one additional meaning and one additional way you might hear this verb used. So if we cite someone for something, you might be officially ordering someone to appear in a court of law. Let's look at an example sentence and then we'll talk about this meaning. The officer cited him for driving under the influence. So another way to think about this is giving someone a ticket. This might not be the type of thing that results in someone being immediately arrested, but it's still a crime. And someone might be asked to appear in court at a later date. So again, newspaper articles, as they talk about different legal violations, you might encounter this particular phrasal verb. Now let's continue practicing using the verb cite in a few different verb tenses. Today we'll take a look at the imperative, the simple past, and the present perfect. Let's start with the imperative. Remember, we use this particular tense or form to give commands. So as I thought about this verb, I thought of directions you might receive from a teacher or a professor. And that's what we're going to look at in our two examples. But before we do that, I want to note that the imperative is a little unique, because there is no stated subject in the sentence. The subject is implied, and it's either you singular or you plural. So the imperative is the only time we can begin affirmative or negative sentences just with our verb, not with a subject. So let's look at the affirmative example now. Cite 5 sources in your paper. Okay. So again, we might pretend that this comes from a writing assignment in a particular course or class, and the teacher is instructing students to find evidence from 5 different sources and provide that, incorporate it, maybe we should say, into one's writing. Okay? Now let's look at a negative. Okay? In the negative imperative, we're going to use don't and then our base verb. Don't cite Wikipedia in your essay. Okay? It's a little pet peeve of many teachers. While Wikipedia can be sort of nice for quick information, it's not always reliable. It's not what we want people to rely on. So there are better sources to get more factual information from. And if you're ever taking a writing course, either in high school or college, this is something your teachers will definitely encourage you to avoid doing. Now let's look at the simple past tense. We're using this verb tense to talk about an action that was completed at a definite time in the past. Now, you won't always see the exact time signal, right? Like yesterday, last week, 10 years ago, something like that. But it might be contained in the paragraph or in the conversation if you're listening to someone speak. What's nice about our simple past tense in the affirmative is we're going to use our ed form no matter what our subject is. So it won't change, which sometimes is a relief after the other slight differentiations in verb tenses and with different subjects. So let's look at an affirmative example. The president cited the officer's bravery and awarded the Medal of Honor. Okay, so that's connecting back to that third definition we spoke about a little just a couple minutes ago. Now, if I want to make a negative simple past tense sentence, I'm going to use did not or the contraction didn't and the base verb. So no ed in the negative. Always good to remember that. Here's an example sentence. They didn't cite any laws or rationale to back up their reasoning. Okay, so here's connecting back to that first definition, providing evidence to support something. If I want to make a yes or no question in the simple past tense, I'm going to start with did, then I'll have my subject, and then the base verb. Did she cite any research or experts to support her claim? Again, this might be a question you're asked as you're evaluating someone else's writing. If you do any peer review, this is a common thing to think about, reflect on, and that can ultimately help improve others' writing. Now let's take a look at the present perfect. We use this verb tense to describe something that happened in the indefinite past tense, so we don't know when, and maybe it's just not that important. But we could also use it to talk about an action that started in the past and it continues into the present. To make an affirmative present perfect sentence, I'm going to use have or has, depending on my subject, and then the participle form of the verb, which here happens to be the same thing. Let's look at an affirmative example. The government has cited and fined over 100 businesses for COVID-19 related violations. Okay? So here we're coming back to that phrasal verb meaning that we looked at earlier, issuing a notice that someone needs to appear in court. So here, perhaps these businesses had too many people inside. They weren't socially distancing their customers or clients. Right? We don't know exactly what happened to all 100 of these, but it has been recognized. They have broken the law, and now they are suffering the consequences of it. If I want to make a negative present perfect sentence, I'm going to insert not after have or has. You might hear native speakers use the contraction form haven't or hasn't. Now let's look at an example. They haven't cited a reason for closing their business. Okay? So again, providing an example, a rationale, why did they decide to do this? Finally, if I want to make a yes or no question in the present perfect, I'm going to start with have or has, then I'll have my subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Have they cited any other legal cases to support their position? And I chose this as an example sentence because cite is a verb you'll hear a great deal when it comes to the law. And lawyers, as they argue cases, they like to point to previous cases to explain why something in the present should be decided a particular way. So again, you're going to hear this verb used a great deal when it comes to the law. Now let's take a look at a related word. We're going to look at the noun citation, right, which is related to our verb. And just like the verb, the noun can have a couple different meanings. A citation could be a quotation from or a reference to a book, a paper, an author, right, some other text. Okay? Here is an example of this definition and usage. There were 50 citations in her final paper. Another meaning for the noun citation is a mention of a praiseworthy act or achievement in an official report. So again, this connects back to that third definition that we looked at a little bit earlier. Here is an example sentence. The retired Air Force officer received a citation for her service. Okay. The last possible meaning for the noun citation is a summons. Here is an example of that. He has received 10 traffic citations. So perhaps he has parked somewhere he shouldn't, maybe was caught speeding, etc., etc. And so he's being asked to appear in traffic court. Right? So that's the idea of a summons. Sometimes you'll hear summons or citation, and they can be used interchangeably. Now, that's the only related word I have for you today, but I wanted to point something else out about the verb cite, and that is that it's a homophone. Right? So there are actually 3 words in English with different spellings and different meanings, but they each have this exact same pronunciation. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the 3 words. Cite, our verb of the day, then sight, and finally site. Again, all 3 of these words are pronounced cite. Okay? So the IGHT, cite, is the power of seeing. It's something that one sees. So you might hear parents say to their children, you can play over here, but don't get out of my sight. Don't get out of kind of the area in which I can see. The third pronunciation, or spelling, I should say, the third spelling, S-I-T-E, can have a couple different meanings. The first is an area of ground on which something is built. So perhaps if a new building or place of business is being built in your city, you might see a sign that says site of the future, right? And it'll describe, is it a new hospital, a new shopping center, something of that nature. SITE, though, can also just be a shortened form of website. You might hear that usage as well. So as you write, just be careful about which one you're using and which one you intend. If it's CITE, SIGHT, or SITE. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I hope you have a great day.